let me start with celebration and point out the unexpected upside of the State Department having to reverse itself. You are now one of the very few groups which can go all over the world and say you have official recognition that you are not a terrorist group, and you can show them the State Department decision, and in effect the State Department has been forced by a judge to admit that you are a group dedicated to freedom and dedicated to liberty, and therefore anyone who ever again asks you, just pull out, every supporter of the MEK should get a copy of the State Department's statement and carry it around and show it and say, this is reality. I would say to the administration, if you're going to support freedom in Libya, why not freedom in Iran? If you're going to support freedom in Egypt, why not freedom in Iran? If you're going to support freedom in Syria, why not freedom in Iran? What is this blind spot that the one country whose dictatorship is overtly hostile in its language and whose effort to get nuclear weapons is now recognized worldwide is the one country we're not focusing on, whereas if we had any strategic sense, the one country we would place the greatest emphasis on would be helping the people of Iran free themselves from the dictatorship which is currently in charge of the country.
If you add up all the people killed by Mubarak, Gaddafi, and Assad, it is nothing compared to what the Ayatollahs have done in Iran over the last 3 decades. If we're for a regime change in Egypt and Libya and Syria, what about Iran? We should be for a regime change in Iran. And most of all, the person that we have to praise for this is Madame Mariam Rajavi. She's the president-elect of the National Council of Resistance in Iran. I've come to know her. All my colleagues have come to know her. We have great respect for her. We realize her dedication to freedom, to democracy, to a lawful and peaceful Iran. Over the last 6 months, we've watched her agonize about the safety of the people in Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf. Every decision she had to make, she knew their lives were at stake, and that weighed with her, and that stayed with her. The woman of great compassion and great leadership. Without her, we would not be where we are today. With her, we can see a very different path for Iran and the Middle East. As the people of America get to know Madame Rajavi, they're going to get to see a totally different path for the Middle East. Totally different path for the Middle East. How about a government in the Middle East that is headed by a woman? Man, wouldn't that crack through the barrier? And a woman who has respect for all religions, not domination by one. This is a great woman. This is a great patriot. This is a woman who understands the inherent values of the United States and the universal values that should be at the bedrock of that institution across the street.
Where else can you get Newt Gingrich, Tom Ridge, John Bolton, Rudy Giuliani on the Republican side, and Bill Richardson, Patrick Kennedy, and Carolyn Maloney together? You know why we're together? Because we're for democracy in Iran. Because we're for the MEK.
And I think in terms of bringing a credible voice of opposition to the regime in Tehran, this is now an opportunity to disprove the critics here in America where it can have such an influence. And there has not been a time when it was more important to have more critical voices raised. I have long believed that it should be the declared policy of the government of the United States that we seek regime change in Tehran and we support any legitimate group that seeks that objective as well. We can say now that with the terrorist designation listing, there is no reason that the MEK can't move to the forefront of the opposition. It really rests with the MEK.
And I have joined with 283 members of Congress in sponsoring House Resolution 704 supporting Camp Ashraf. Nearly 3,400 Iranian dissidents, members of MEK, are residing in Camp Ashraf, and liberty in Iraq have suffered under Ahmadinejad as he has used Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki to attack them in Iraq.
We're here outside the United Nations, and I think it's appropriate to call upon the Secretary General of the United Nations to take a look at Camp Liberty and change the designation from a temporary location to a refugee camp. It's absolutely essential that the United Nations recognize that for the foreseeable future, 3,000 Iranian dissidents will be there, subject to the whims of the Maliki government, and we know that subject to their oppression and repression and violent incursion into Camp Ashraf, dozens have died. So we say to the United Nations Secretary General, Camp Liberty must be designated as a refugee camp. It must be afforded that international legal status. We have to be sure that these men and women have a safe haven. They also must have living conditions that are tolerable as they go through this process. So we call on the UN, and we call on the United States, and we call on the broader global community to beseech the Iraqi government, to encourage the Iraqi government, better yet demand that they honor the commitment they made to the United States when they said they would provide the security and protection for the people of Camp Ashraf who've now moved to liberty.